All right, well, Halitics, I'm Hal Ginsberg. So glad to be talking today. It is Thursday, and you can see from the thumbnail I did today, that's actually a picture I took with the Capitol dome in the background. And I've said it before, Washington really is a beautiful city. It's so nice the way they laid it out, the way L'Enfant laid it out with the avenues, the boulevards, kind of a little bit of a Parisian feel to it. And what I love is no skyscrapers, which is also like Paris. In Paris, there's those tall buildings, but they're all outside the city, unfortunately, often right outside the city. So the city isn't very large. If you've ever been to Paris, you know what I'm talking about. It's not that large and pretty much circular in shape. So ringing the city in various places, you do have these skyscrapers, or at least 30, 40-story buildings. They're pretty unattractive, to say the least. But in the city itself, there's no tall buildings. And it's the same in D.C., really no tall buildings. And it's better than Paris in that you don't have kind of a ring of skyscrapers around the city. There are some tall buildings across the Potomac River in Virginia, but it's only one small area and it's pretty far away. So you don't really. So D.C. is a beautiful city, very nicely laid out. And I always like to go downtown. A lot of trees, as you can see in that image. Let me put it back up. I did take that picture, and I put some headlines up there too because, yeah, I mean, it's really, you know, what do we do? And that's kind of a question I've been asking a lot. Maybe it gets frustrating for people. We don't really have answers. I most certainly don't have any answers to that question. And, you know, what more can we do? But I guess I kind of feel like what I did today wasn't really that big a deal, to be perfectly honest. Let me show you that picture there. So you can't see me in it, but I think I'm the legs. You can see my feet under the letter I there. You can see my legs, and my head is where that question mark is after the zero, the O and do, and then the question mark is where my head is. So we did walk around, we marched around, got into it with a few bystanders, people who argued with us. I got into it with one guy, got shushed by another protester with me because he said there's no genocide. And I was like, what are you talking about? What you know, what media are you consuming? And I got like, shush, don't do that. You know, we don't engage. But then I talked to another activist about it because I was kind of embarrassed. Like, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have said anything. I was a little bit embarrassed by the, you know, because I couldn't control myself. You know, I'm so upset. The news is so awful. Children being killed every day, dozens of children being killed deliberately, people being starved. Obviously, it's ethnic cleansing on steroids. It's genocide, and you know, I get triggered. I just that upsetting, of course. People who speak out, like Miss Rachel, I don't know if you know that, I guess she's called Ms. Rachel. She does children's videos on YouTube, and she has been outspoken against what Israel's doing, saying, how can we say we love children and yet be supporting the killing of all these little children in Gaza? They deserve security. They deserve a home. They deserve their parents' love. And instead, we're killing them. We're killing their parents. We're killing their families. And she's, you know, 100% spot on, and yet she gets attacked for that. People are going after Greta Thunberg. I've seen this a lot. There's a lot of hate towards her, and I think it's because, honestly, she comes across as somewhat self-righteous, which she is. I mean, but she's very earnest. There isn't a lot of humor with Greta, and I think some people feel like she's kind of shaming them. You know, who is this girl? I mean, she's a young woman now, but who is this girl to just camp out in front of the Swedish parliament, demand change? You know, it kind of makes you feel bad about yourself. Well, why aren't I doing that? And since she's not really too humorous, she's kind of, I think she's even said she's Asperger's, so she doesn't really, you know, I'm probably a little bit, I'm probably on that spectrum too, although I have a little bit of a sense of humor. So I wonder about people. Some people might say I don't. But I think you can have a sense of humor and have Asperger's. But she's somewhat, she's very earnest, let's put it that way. And I think that can be a turnoff. I just think she's a wonderful person. I think she's a great hero. I think she's one of the most important and valuable people there is. We'll talk a little bit more about her in a bit, about Greta Thunberg. So yeah, what more can we do? You can see my the picture. Actually, I didn't take that picture. It was taken with my camera now that I think about it, but how could I have taken it if I'm in it? But a real nice job with it. And you see a couple of headlines: Israel will not allow Madeleine, that's the ship we were talking about, to dock in Gaza. And also U.S. vetoes UN resolution demanding immediate Gaza ceasefire. So, I think what we can do, and I'm not prepared to do it. I mean, I'll say we could do it, but I'm not prepared to do it. Hey, stand in the middle of traffic. I mean, we were walking around an intersection right there on, if you know the area at all, not Institution, Independence. There's Constitution and Independence on either side of the mall. And Constitution is north of the mall, north of the Capitol, which you can see the dome there, and Independence is south. So we're actually on Independence. We're below the Capitol, south of the Capitol in that image. And so I called it Institution because portmanteaued Independence and Constitution. But no, it's Independence. But I'll tell you what you can do. What we could do: stand right in the middle of Independence Avenue and block traffic. That would do something. But of course, we would also get arrested, and I don't want to be arrested. And we probably would need a few thousand people. I mean, because just having like 10 of us arrested, big deal. But if you have 10,000, 20,000, 50,000, 100,000, if you have people every single day showing up and disrupting, which can really make an effect. We saw it happen with Occupy, and then the streets were cleared. I think was de Blasio the mayor then? He may have been. Barack Obama supported not Occupy. He didn't support Occupy. He supported clearing the streets. And so that movement, which seemed to promise some real hope, some real change, fizzled very, very unfortunately. I know some would say, oh, yeah, you had successes. I'm not clear what they were. I did read a very interesting, and I will get to the Gaza story. By the way, call me anytime, 240-242-5646, 240-242, what is my number, 5646. Ari commenting, by the way, Ari had I reposted, I shared something that Ari had posted, but he writes, or get a nice big sailboat, go sailing while doing the right thing. You're doing it, Hal, but more voices needed. Oh, he's saying more voices needed. I wish I was doing enough. I wish it had some impact, but I guess that's the theory, right? We all keep talking, we all keep speaking out, and hopefully some good comes out of it. But we do demand, and it's interesting, because that one more point, that question is, what more can we do? The people demand that we stop arming Israel, and yet obviously our government isn't listening. Obviously, Israel doesn't care what the people in the United States demand. The people of Israel support what the government is doing there, the Israeli military is doing. But we see our electeds through the executive branch, through Trump now, vetoing a UN resolution demanding immediate Gaza ceasefire, even though most Americans, and Medea Benjamin talks about this in her most recent video, which I did share, I believe, from Instagram, which is what maybe Ari shared, that we want that ceasefire, and we're not getting it. So democracy has left the building, and we can speak out. We're not going to go to jail yet for that, but I think disruption is absolutely necessary at this point. I think that's really the only way we're going to have the change we need. Okay, more death, more killing, more carnage in Gaza. And this is the Turkish media, Anadolu Ajansi. Israel attacks kill 70 more Gazans as death toll nears 54,700. I was watching a video, I think it was Generational Change, Jen Perlman, maybe not, where the number was estimated at possibly up to 500,000. And that's based on what The Guardian, The Lancet was reporting last summer. And to be frank with you, I think that seems reasonable. Because when you look at the images, even when the New York Times has done its kind of overview, its map of Gaza, and it shows even just like a map, not even images, not even pictures, but just the map, you can see there's like little sort of simulated explosion memes or icons everywhere. And every image you ever see of Gaza these days shows it in rubble. It's rubble. So given that this region was home to what, 2.3, 2.4 million people, how could the fatalities be, 2.5%? The entire region has been razed. But that's the official number. That's what the Arab, and Turkey is not an Arab country, but the Middle Eastern countries are reporting 54,700. That's from the Palestinian Health Ministry. And we'll give you the, not quite 54,700 yet, the numbers I have as of this afternoon. Israel and the U.S. have killed a minimum of 54,677 Gazans, and Trump and Netanyahu responsible for, I think, that 4402 I did not update. So let me update that now. That would be 4472. So there you go. So it's updated now to 4472, and likely over 2,000 kids. We talk about this, every life is precious. I mean, it could be a senior. Their life is precious. But I do think we have, and I'm in my 60s now, but even so, I don't want old people to be killed. I don't want them to be hurt. I want them to be able to live in dignity, to live in security, and to live a full span. The thought of these seniors in Gaza, so many of whom I'm sure have died, is heartbreaking. It's heartrending. But I also think, as humans, there is an innate sympathy and innate empathy that we have, even at whatever age, for the very young, for children whose lives are in front of them, who can derive so much joy, who should be finding something new every day to delight in. And Israel and the United States have taken all of that away from the children of Gaza and from Palestinians, whether they're in Gaza or the West Bank, many in Lebanon. Israel and the United States have taken everything away from those children. And it's heartbreaking. And I do think as human beings, we're going to feel that to a degree we might not feel as much pain when we think of a 75-year-old of an octogenarian whose life is snuffed out prematurely, as so many have been by Israel and the United States. We asked the question yesterday, can Greta Thunberg and the Freedom Flotilla stop Israel and the United States? And it appears clear, obviously. I mean, it was kind of a rhetorical question. We knew they couldn't. But although they say, right, the pen is mightier than the sword, maybe, just maybe, the story as it comes out that these 12 heroes brave the Mediterranean, brave Israeli military to provide some tiny little bit of support, some supplies, some rice to the starving multitudes, that maybe that activates, galvanizes public opinion to really change course. And I think we are seeing that, right? We're seeing that in the UK. We talked about it with Keir Starmer, making the case that Israel should no longer be treated as a favored nation by the UK, that they're going to cut off a trade deal with Israel. So it does seem to maybe impact a little bit, but ultimately the US is Israel's bestie. And as long we're their enforcer, we're their protector. In hockey, when you have a great goal scorer like a Wayne Gretzky, they often have a little protector, a big protector, a big, massive, brutish goons, they're sometimes called, to just make sure anyone who tries to check too hard the goal scorer, they get knocked into next week, basically. So that's what Israel has in the United States. We're their goon. We protect Israel regardless of what they do. And so here's from the Jerusalem Post, Freedom Flotilla will not be allowed to dock in Gaza. So all those starving children will, well, many of them will die, of course. And so maybe they'll survive, and maybe they'll be permanently injured. Maybe they'll have brain damage because their developing minds didn't have enough nutrients. We just don't know. But that Freedom Flotilla, the Madeleine, will not be allowed to dock in Gaza. And Israel kind of, I think, was balancing the bad press it will get as a result of that decision with what? I really don't know. But they tell us, I guess. They kind of give us an answer as to what was the calculus in the Jerusalem Post. So according to Can News, which I think is a maybe some sort of Arab service, I'm not certain. According to Can News, Israel initially considered allowing the ship to dock in Gaza after officials determined it did not pose a threat. So it isn't a threat. I mean, it's a little ship. I was watching an interview with a guy on the ship, and he's like, "Hey, yeah, we're 60 feet." He actually said 18 meters, but okay, I'm going to round up to 60 feet. And, all we carry is rice. We got a lot of bags of rice and other food. There's no weapons. There's no arms. You can easily see. Everything's right on deck anyway. And Israel, I presume, had determined, there's no pretext that they have like machine guns or rifles or something that could hurt us. So we might let them land. But ultimately, they reversed the decision, and the explanation for that, and I'm going to just show this picture. This is from the Jerusalem Post, so appreciate the Post putting this up there, Jerusalem Post, and they got a picture of Greta Thunberg in there. We'll talk about the picture in a moment. I have one other comment about what Israel is doing, just the cruelty of Israel. But let's just talk just a moment more about that decision. The Israeli military decided they would not let the ship dock to avoid setting a precedent that could undermine the blockade. So, oh my God, maybe a few dozen people would be fed for a while. How terrible would that be? We'd be undermining really our genocide, right? It would just mean we'd, have to kill for, we'd have to proceed against Gaza a few extra days to starve out those folks who got fed by the Madeleine. And also, I think they were concerned because they said it, the activists would have been stranded in Gaza. And certainly there would have been a demand from some of their home countries, maybe not the United States, but I'm sure Sweden would have said, we want Turnberg back. I think there's some Brits on that ship. As we know from what Stormer said recently, the UK government is not quite as cozy with Netanyahu as they've been Netanyahu. So maybe Israel didn't want to have to deal with some irate ambassadors if they allowed the ship to dock. So that may be the reason. They don't want people getting pictures. They don't want people sharing their experiences under the Israeli occupation, under the Israeli devastation, the Israeli starvation. They don't want that. So they said no. Now, there's a picture of Turnberg there. And, I think they used that. I mean, I don't know who shared that. I don't know where they got that picture from. I presume somebody just put it on Facebook from the ship is my guess. I don't know. Or social media somewhere tweeted it out. I don't know. X'd it out. But, she's smiling there. And I was thinking a lot about that smile. She obviously looks like she's pretty happy. And I was thinking about that. So I talk about young people and you think, well, how could she be happy? I mean, she's on this humanitarian mission. She's delivering aid to people who are being starved to death. And, this is youth. You do take joy in life. And you're sitting on this ship. You're out in the beautiful Mediterranean Sea. I know it can be rough. I know that it can be dangerous. There's nothing around you but water. But it's a beautiful sunny day. You're with people that care about other humans just like you do, who share your values. So sure, she's going to have a happy moment. I get it. And I think, again, what defines Greta Thunberg as a hero is that she recognizes her fortune, her good fortune, her privilege, and she wants others to enjoy the same good things, the same beauty that she has, and so many don't. And you look at people like our leaders, and I don't mean just Trump, but I do mean Trump, but not just Trump. They have so much. They're so privileged. Remember that image I shared of Obama's compound there in Martha's Vineyard? I mean, the wealth that these people have aggregated for themselves is just extraordinary. But rather than like Turnberg, who isn't living so large, I mean, she's on a little boat there. It's not even her boat. But rather than sharing or wanting that others should enjoy the same good fortune, or at least a reasonable facsimile, people like Trump, they look at Gaza as beachfront property for them to exploit, for them from which they can profit. People like Netanyahu will clear out the Gazans and have Jews in there, and that'll expand my power base. And, I won't have to go to jail either because I'll never leave power as the Prime Minister of Israel. Obama, came to office promising hope and change, and he did an awful lot to protect the wealthy and powerful. Obamacare meant billions of dollars worth of new customers for for-profit health care. He expanded the war in Afghanistan, again, profiting people like his, I believe she was an advisor at that time, Avril Haines. And we see, it doesn't matter what party. Nancy Pelosi, she stymies a bill to stop insider trading by Congress. She's already so rich. She has so much. But she wants more. She wants that stock market rigged in her favor. So that's what we call sociopathy. That's what we call psychopathy, I guess. I don't know. Psychopathology. You don't have that feeling, that sense of concern for others. And obviously, American leaders don't. And just as obviously, Greta Thunberg does. And so, she's a hero, and they're, not, to put it as kindly as possible. So, yeah, they want it all for themselves. They don't want to share. When they have joy, it's multiplied by knowing that others don't. And that's what we have. That's the world we have right now. Okay, I got this post. I know I see Ari commenting. I really appreciate that, Ari, in the Facebook. I don't know. I've got all these different places where I've got my videos and things, so I can't monitor everything. I really should be checking the chat. See if Ari posts there. Emogi sometimes posts there. I don't think I've seen anything in the chat right now, so that's fine. This is from Ari. Also, this was on Facebook, and I wanted to share it because I have a response to this. And as I was, again, I was with Code Pink this morning, which is part of the reason I'm late. I started not late, but I started at 2 today. Why are organizations like Code Pink, Women for Peace, Veterans for Peace, Poor People's Campaign not combining energies, efforts to collectively form large conglomerate-type organizations similar to for-profit corporations, add faith-based type organization, and an unstoppable force would be formed? No. What are the impediments? What implications? Right. Let's go into that a little bit. Well, I think we do work with other groups. For example, there's a lot of overlap with Code Pink, which I work closely with, and Jewish Voices for Peace, which I also work closely with. When I was more in the progressive institutional political space, not so much pro-peace as much as kind of the, I guess, reform the Democratic Party space, we also worked closely with different groups. When I was with Our Revolution, we worked with Progressive Maryland. We worked pretty closely with Progressive Democrats of America. So the groups do come together. It's not like they're totally siloed off. But the point that Ari makes is a fair one. It really is. I think a lot of it is you have leaders in each different group, and they like their leadership. They don't want to have to give it up. They don't want to cede, the ultimate decision making to some larger group or to some other individual. When you have three companies that merge into one, you suddenly have only one CEO instead of three general managers or presidents or CEOs or whatever they call themselves. You lose power unless you're the one who's the takeover, right? Who does the takeover itself. So I think there's that. I think also, frankly, the rank and file of a lot of these groups don't necessarily want to merge. Because, for example, if you're with Code Pink, there's a few dozen of us. And, we all have kind of a little bit of a say over what the direction the group takes. So if we merge with other groups, we would lose a little bit of that. So I think there's that. Maybe you have less of an issue with in conservative political circles. But I do also would say, yeah, there's a lot of sharing. There's a lot of working together. And we did work together today, which I'll show a picture of that in a moment. Also, you mentioned, Ari, Poor People's Campaign. Poor People's Campaign is really much more economic focused. Yes, they do talk about war and peace, as I understand it. But the Reverend Barber, who is a great person, and I'm not, I think he is a true disciple of Dr. King, but he, I think, has a little bit of a blind spot for the Democratic Party. I think, like so many others in the organizing space these days, really perceives the only change vehicle out there, the only car, if you will, that can take us from proto-fascism, if you want to say that's where we are, to a true progressive or populist economic democracy. I think Dr. Barber, and I don't want to speak for him, and I might be wrong, but my sense is that Dr. Barber perceives the Democratic Party as the one vehicle that can take us on that journey. And I disagree completely with that assessment. I believe the Democratic Party is a vehicle that is preventing us, that is hemming us in, that is sheepdogging us within an oligarchy. So, there's a worldview that's very, very different, an ultimate answer that is given very differently by the leadership in Poor People's Campaign. So, and all of us groups have slightly different perspectives. For example, Code Pink really doesn't work very much at all with politicians, just a little bit, but they generally have their own agenda. And it's really, I wouldn't say it's certainly not apolitical, but it's not partisan. They're not trying to elect, as far as I can tell, I don't know that they've ever endorsed anybody in particular. That's not really like some of the other groups like JVP. They have Democrats speak at their Jewish Voice for Peace. They have Democrats speak at their conventions and the like. So, there's slightly different nuances to these groups and different strategies and different tactics. And each one has its own little fiefdom, and, they don't want to share. And I think that's the answer. Why there isn't more working together. I think that's the answer, for good or for bad. And I think a lot of times it's for good, but I get that to the extent we could really, really concentrate our power, that would be a wonderful, wonderful thing. All right, let me, I was going to do this, but hey, go ahead. If I haven't already, please do subscribe now. And also, please, I would really, really want to see you guys on Facebook, on Halitics on Facebook. We're seeing a little growth there, seeing a little bit of growth in the YouTube channel. Share, posts from Halitics. The YouTube, Facebook, not YouTube. Facebook has, they don't call it demonetizing me exactly, but what they've done is they don't promote my Facebook page anymore. Apparently, they don't like, they haven't barred me. I can post anything I like. Anyone can find me. But apparently I'm out of their algorithm. Whereas before they would share some of my stuff. Now I think they share a lot less of it. So you have to actively seek me out. I'm not sure why that happened, but what I heard from another content creator is that if you're too outspoken in support of Palestine, if you're too critical of Israel, you're done. So maybe. and not done that they're going to necessarily bar me, deplatform me, but at least at this point, they're not going to promote my page. That said, the content creator I saw, a lot bigger than I am, a huge audience actually, really good guy too. His name in fact is Guy Christensen, 19-year-old maybe still, who's been an outspoken advocate for Palestine, and he's even gone further than I have in some of his takes, which you can check out on TikTok. That's where he is now. Oh, by the way, if you lose me, if something happens and I can't be on these platforms, I'll figure out another way to get my voice out, probably through my own Facebook, my own webpage, which was halginsberg.com. I may go back to that if I have to, but I much prefer to use the social media pages. They're just, YouTube is great in terms of the platform. It's tremendous. And I get you're kind of making a deal with the devil, but they don't control my content. Nobody tells me what I can or can't say. If they deplatform me because they don't like my content, well, then there's nothing I can do about that. But be assured that as long as I'm broadcasting, I'm telling you what I feel. I'm not in any way, stifling my message or modifying it or muting it in any way to avoid offending people. That I don't do. What I will say though is that I'm careful sometimes not to go too far if I don't have the receipts. If I can't at least justify my statements, I was going to say prove, but a lot of times you can't prove something. But if I can't justify what I'm saying, then I'm not going to say it. That I am careful about. 240-242-5646. Love to talk to you. So the question of working with other groups. This is a picture that I actually did take. I didn't take the picture I showed you before. That was taken of me, but not by me. This is a press conference that happened earlier today. And speaking in the blue dress there is Delia Ramirez. She's a California representative. In the red suit, closest to you you can see Jan Schakowsky. She is a Illinois congresswoman. She's a Democrat. You can see by the way she's standing. She's now, she's a senior. She's in her 80s. She's, I believe, 80. And this is a problem. As we said, Democratic leadership is getting old. Democrats, period, are getting old in Congress. And Schakowsky is an example of that. Next to Schakowsky is Pramila Jayapal. So these are three Congress members who are supporting the bill. There it is, block the bomb, stop sending weapons to Israel. And so Code Pink was there to show support. I did not stand in the picture, obviously, since I took it. You know what? Honestly, I think we should support the bill. There's a link to in the discussion of this, in this podcast, this YouTube. There's a link in the description where you can easily reach out to your Congress member. I hope you'll do it. I've done it. I reached out to thank Jamie Raskin for being a co-sponsor. But the bottom line is, I believe this is more performative than anything else. It's not going to pass. They're not going to get all the Democrats to support it. They're not going to go after the Democrats who don't vote for it. They're not going to call them out. And that's what we need. And that's why I didn't really want to even be there. I don't really even want to, show my support for these people because I really don't respect them. I wanted you to know who that individual is that I circled in yellow because Ari made the point or asked the question, why don't you all work together? So that, and there it is. Let me show you the picture. There's a little bit better. You can see much more clearly there, Schakowsky and Ramirez and Jayapal as well. But let me see if I can get you a really good shot of that where you can really see what I'm talking about. So in terms of working across across group lines, that yellow oval is circling an Amnesty International representative. So here's an example of Code Pink working with a very well-known organization, Amnesty International. And we spoke to him before the press conference. He came over and said hi to us. He's wearing a suit. I thought he was a Congress member or someone like that, but he wasn't. He's a progressive activist and a member of Amnesty International. So very glad to be working with them. And that's an example of where we do work together. And just real quick, this is the bill that we're pushing now, and that the press conference was designed to highlight. We actually I think it dropped yesterday, maybe, yeah, because the date line's the 4th. And actually today would be today is the 5th. I thought it was maybe the 6th. It's June, the 6th month, but it's the 5th day of that 6th month. And this is what we're asking representatives. Co-sponsor Senate Res 224. You saw Jayapal in that picture. Some others as well. Not Schakowsky. She's not mentioned. Neither is Ramirez, but they're both supporters of that bill. And it's a co-sponsor, the House companion of Senate Res 224, calling for the urgent delivery of humanitarian aid. So it's a good bill. It's the right bill. It's the right legislation. Hopefully it'll pass. It almost certainly won't. And finally, with regard to that bill, the link again is in the description of today's video. So Congress must end the blockade and stop starving civilians. Unfortunately, our government is going in the exact opposite direction. And what we just learned today, or what just happened today, is the United States vetoed a bill demanding ceasefire, demanding that aid be allowed to enter Israel. And that was vetoed by our government. So we're not getting anything. That's why I talk about blocking traffic, stymieing any kind of, stymieing commerce, because I don't know what else can work. I don't know that would work. But it very well might just lead to a lot of arrests without any real change. I believe in political, to the extent possible, change through politics. In New York, there is a primary for the mayor's race in the fall. The primary is coming up on June 24th. There does appear to be a genuine progressive in the race. Now, this is the Democratic primary, and we're very, very skeptical of Democrats here. But if I lived in New York City, I would be registered as a Democrat. I'm not now. I'm in the process of registering as a Green. But I would register in advance so I could be in this primary, vote in this primary and vote for Zohran Mamdani. And one reason that I think it's a particularly important to be registered as a Democrat in New York City right now is because they have ranked choice voting. And I am slightly hopeful, not tremendously hopeful, slightly hopeful that the ranked choice voting could allow Zohran Mamdani, who is clearly running as the progressive. He's calling for rent freeze for all, middle-class apartments. He's calling for free bus service. And I don't know whether he's calling for free subway service, but he is definitely calling for free bus service in New York. And I heard a discussion about this, and I don't necessarily support a blanket rent freeze. I think there's some real problems with that. To solve the economic woes of New York's poor, struggling working class and middle class, you need to do more. Yes, rents are way too high, and a rent freeze would certainly afford some temporary relief. But in the end, what we need is much more middle class housing, more apartments built, renovated, retrofitted so that working and middle class people can live in them and afford them. We need higher wages for blue collar and white collar workers in New York City. There's a lot of things that need to be done, but I would certainly vote for Mamdani. Ahead of Andrew Cuomo, that's not even a doubt. There are many other candidates running, including some others who are progressive, I guess. So there's no need with ranked choice voting if you prefer, I don't know, there were some other names out there. I don't think Brad Lander, who's the former treasurer, maybe he's the treasurer now of the city. I don't think he's great. I think he's kind of a bit of a faux aggressive, but certainly better than Cuomo. But you like a Lander, put Lander, first. But it's ranked choice. So as long as you rank Cuomo last, especially after Mamdani, because Mamdani is going to be the second most first place votes. So the way ranked choice voting works, the candidate who gets the fewest first place votes, they are eliminated from the contest, and their voters who ranked other candidates, those votes go to the candidate they ranked second. And so on and so on. And then you look and you see how many votes everyone else has after you've eliminated the bottom most, and then who has the next bottom most is eliminated, and their second or possibly third place votes go to the next candidate. So that means as long as you put Cuomo at the very bottom and you put Mamdani ahead of him, Mamdani could definitely win, because Cuomo's not getting anywhere near 50% of the vote on the first ballot. And this is what I put in my Facebook page in response. So all my NYC friends, please either leave Cuomo off your ballot entirely or rank him dead last. I love ranked choice voting. I think this is great. A lot of people don't like it. I acknowledge there may be times, there may be races where you have a real progressive running against two moderates, and the progressive could win without ranked choice voting because they might get 40% of the vote, and that each of the two moderates each gets 30%. That could happen. But if the two moderates each have the other as their second choice, the voters for each of the two moderates put the other moderate as their second choice, then in the second round, the progressive loses. On balance, I think ranked choice voting is much better. You don't get stuck with a candidate that most people don't like, most people don't want. That doesn't happen under ranked choice voting. And hey, if the voters really and truly want a moderate, then that's what they want, even if I don't. So I love ranked choice voting. And I think in this case, in this race, there's a real opportunity to elect a true progressive, or at least a true progressive Democrat, assuming that's not an oxymoron, because of ranked choice voting, not despite ranked choice voting. I'll just speak very briefly about Montgomery County, where I live, Montgomery County, Maryland. So the last two the county executive races were won by the most progressive candidate running, Mark Elrich, somebody I backed. I have some issues with Mark. He has, for example, he supports the Maryland Israeli Development Center, which is a terrible, terrible thing. But Mark, to his credit, has been pretty good on a lot of issues, including affordable housing and the environment. He wouldn't have won probably if we had ranked choice voting for that race. I don't think he would have won, because he got about 40% of the vote, and several more moderate candidates split the rest. I believe those more moderate candidates would have endorsed each other as a second choice, and I believe their voters might well have chosen another moderate. Each one who chose particular moderate. A couple of races ago, when Mark first won, there was a guy named Berlin, and there were some others who were pretty Blair. And I think Berlin's first choices would have gone to Blair, and I think Berlin's first, those who voted for Berlin first would have put Blair second, and those who voted for Blair first would have put Berlin second, and they would have ultimately had more votes in toto than Mark. So the result wouldn't have been what I favored. I don't think that's what's going to happen in New York. If anything, you have a more progressive electorate than an affluent Montgomery County. And I think in New York's affluent too, but there's a lot of working class voters, a lot of blue collar voters, especially in Queens and Brooklyn, Staten Island, not as densely populated. And I think they could together, I hope they can together, put Mamdani over the top. You're wondering whether Mamdani is the right choice, whether you should vote for Mamdani. Well, here's the Jewish Insider. I think they pretty much make the case by trying to make the case against Mamdani, they make a perfect case for him. Orthodox Jewish leaders move toward Cuomo as concerns grow over Mamdani's record. So if the Orthodox Jewish leaders are inclined towards Cuomo, that's, to my way of thinking, a very, very strong endorsement for Mamdani. But let's not be too quick. For example, religions do believe in housing the poor and feeding the hungry, and I don't believe the Orthodox Jews are any different. So maybe they prefer Cuomo for reasons that I find acceptable. So what does the Jewish Insider tell us? Jewish Insider, very, very aggressively Zionist, very, very aggressively anti-Palestine, anti-life. Mamdani, a longtime supporter of boycott and divestment campaigns against Israel. Sounds really good, doesn't it? Let's not spend our money to help a genocidal state. I think he's right there. So that seems like a good reason to vote for Mamdani. He's asked, well, what about Israel? Don't they have the right to exist? Sure. As a state with equal rights. Sounds really good. Just like, sort of sounds like me. That's what I would have said too. Yes. One state solution. Sure, there should be an Israel as long as everyone who lives inside of its borders has equal political rights and guaranteed economic justice. Yeah. So there you go. There's your choice. Mamdani. Here's another candidate that I featured already, but I want to play a little bit more because I was thinking about her, and I have a little bit of qualms, honestly, about supporting Mamdani, about endorsing. I have a little bit of a qualm because he's running as a Democrat. And the Democratic Party is absolutely the place where good ideas go to die, where progressivism goes to die. There's no doubt about it. So I have qualms about endorsing Mamdani, but I would support him for sure in that primary. But I want to play this clip because this is a clip. I played a clip for Arlen a couple days ago when he was on Tuesday with Arlen, but I want to play a little more of now I can't remember. This is so awful that I'm not remembering the woman's name who I support, right? She's Workers Strike Back, Shama Sawant. So Shama, it's on the screen. I should have seen it. Shama Sawant. She's asked with whom she'll caucus, right? That's the question. And I was thinking about that today because committee assignment, she's running for Congress. She's running to unseat a neocon, neo-lib Dem, a warmonger Dem, Adam Smith, who gets enormous amounts of money. I think his number one bundler is AIPAC. He gets money from Palantir, the spying agency, a spying company. So he's terrible. We need to replace him. But I was thinking about this. Shama's running as an independent, which I support. I don't want her to run as a Democrat. But in Congress, there's so much power in the committees, right? Talk about the House Oversight Committee, which where the Democrats refused to let AOC become the ranking member. And all these different committees, they recommend legislation, and that's often how bills come to a vote. So Shama's asked about that. Wait, if you're an independent, you're so outspoken, you can't stand the Democrats. Democrats do let some independents run, caucus with them, like Angus King, like Bernie, like I believe Jared Golden may be an independent. Not sure about that. So she's asked, well, and I was thinking about this, who would she caucus with? How could she ever get a committee assignment if she runs as an independent? Is that a problem? So I was so glad, and I decided I wanted to see whether she addresses this issue. She does. Let's play the clip.
This is not a question I'm preoccupied by, and I'll explain what happened in City Hall.
So she's asked, and you can't really understand in the video the question. But she's asked, well, how would you caucus? With whom would you caucus? If you are elected, would you caucus with the Democrats? And she says, I'm not really preoccupied by that, and let me tell you why.
The way we win victories for working people, let alone ending the genocide and ending U.S. military funding for the Israeli state, is not by going and caucusing by the parties of genocide.
So she's saying going to caucus with the Democrats ain't going to change anything. They're a party of genocide, just like the Republicans are. So caucusing with them isn't going to change the situation. So what is her theory? What is Shama Sawant's theory of change if it's not working within the system, working within the party at the committee level to push legislation? What is her theory of change? Let's hear it.
You do that by using your office, elected office, as a platform to galvanize and mobilize working people in the city of Seattle. We have done that. We mobilized working people in the tens of thousands. If we have a seat in Congress for our working class politics, then we will mobilize millions of people. It will be the pressure of millions of people that will make the U.S. Congress and also whoever the president is at the time, it will put pressure on them. That is how we have won every single victory in City Hall. After I took office in January of 2014, a couple of weeks from then, two of the most leading Democrats in City Hall came to my office, sat me down, and told me, it is all well and good that you roused the rabble and you got into City Hall, but we are here to tell you that City Hall runs on our terms and you are not going to win any minimum wage increase, let alone 15. Less than 6 months later, we had won 15. And those two, along with every other politician there, including Bruce Harrell, were forced to vote yes on $15 an hour.
All right, so really powerful stuff, right? I mean, she was able by mobilizing, and I believe it's very accurate because you can look at Shama Sawant's record in Seattle, and she did get that $15 minimum wage passed, and she did get affordable housing built, and some neighborhoods that had previously been gentrified, people who had been pushed out of certain neighborhoods were given significant housing allowances. Now, is Seattle some sort of model city? Is it so perfect? No. I mean, I was in Seattle recently, and I have to say there's a very serious homeless problem, and there's issues. But the quality of life there is significantly better for poor, struggling, working people than it would otherwise be, because Shama Sawant did exactly what she said as an independent, not as a Democrat. She was able to galvanize the people to put enormous pressure on electeds. And they did, in a number of cases, the right thing. So I think her theory of change is borne out. And I think she is the one we need to support. I would vote for Mamdani. Look, I don't want Andrew Cuomo, the corrupt governor. I don't want that corrupt governor that, I guess, a sexual predator. I don't want him to be hand-selected by the billionaires on Wall Street because they can't stand Mamdani, because he would, do whatever he could to raise their taxes and to defang them to a degree. So I would vote for him in a heartbeat. But ultimately, we need to elect non-Democrats, non-Republicans. We have to go outside the oligarchy parties. And that is Shama Sawant. That is Shama Sawant. All right, 240-242-5646. That is not, by the way, Bernie, because Bernie caucuses with the Democrats, because Bernie will only go so far in his criticism of the Democrats. That is certainly not AOC, who is a true blue Democrat. Her bona fides are beyond reproach, as her lies at the Democratic National Convention prove. Okay, I wanted to we're kind of getting towards the end, and I got about 5-6 more minutes left, so let's go do this story. This was, and I mentioned this yesterday, why the Trump protests will fail. This is from the Lever News, Lever Reports. Lever is a David Sirota project, and I've never been shy about saying I have my real problems with David Sirota. My biggest is when he was in Colorado, working for, I guess, the Denver Post. I think or maybe it was his own paper. I don't know. He was also a talk show host in Colorado when I was a talk show host in Monterey, and he was pretty critical of one of my all-time favorites, Ed Schultz. And I think Ed was far more of a genuine populist than Sirota. I can't remember what their beef was about, but I think Ed was critical at various points of Obama, and Sirota took him to task for that. Not that he necessarily disagreed with Ed's criticism, but he said this isn't the time. So I had real problems with Sirota, and that started then. This is from The Lever, although it's not by Sirota. It's in his online paper there, Why the Trump Protests Will Fail. And there's a lot I like about this piece. She talks, Evelyn does in this piece, about how Rachel Maddow is flogging this No King's Day protest on the 14th, this weekend, right? No, week from Saturday. And Maddow says these types of pro-democracy protests are helping to create a culture in which it is shameful to capitulate to Trump. And she's referencing the law firms like Paul Weiss and, the media company CBS that settle with Trump for millions, the law firms that agree to provide free legal support to Trump pet projects, or that, billionaires like the tech bros who go there and, genuflect before Trump. So it's very obvious who she's criticizing. She's saying, we're going to shame them. And what the Lever News is saying is, this is the wrong thing. You're blaming Amazon and Paul Weiss and Columbia University for the wrong thing. It's not that they've placated Trump or given in to him. The problem is that they're the establishment. They're the elites. Their policies, whether Trump's in office or not, are bad. Their policies hurt workers. Columbia was cracking down on student protests long before Trump took office. Paul Weiss represents the billionaire class and helps them exploit poor, struggling, working people. So the real problem, according to the Lever, according to Quartz, or whatever they're called, Lever, not Quartz, Evelyn Quartz, her name is Quartz. According to her, and I agree with her, the problem isn't necessarily, or that's just a symptom that they kowtow to Trump. The real problem is that they're elite. They have far too much power, far too much influence, and they want to keep it. That's the problem. And she's right. Quartz is right. She's also right when she describes this faux-aggressive No King's Day. What do these protests look like? Rows of professionally printed signs, choreographed chants, speeches by nonprofit leaders, which I absolutely highlight because those nonprofit leaders love to give those speeches to get in front of a big audience. I would too, by the way. But they don't love them because they're going to provide a true message of change, demanding pro-worker, pro-peace, pro-environment. No, that's not why they're there. They're there to increase their own visibility and to increase their fundraising. She goes on to say, Quartz says, there are few named targets. No, they'll name targets as long as they're Republican targets, like Trump, like Musk, like, whoever the villain du jour is, maybe Lindsey Graham. So they'll name targets. They won't name any Democratic targets. They certainly won't name any targets who are powers in the Democratic Party right now. So you won't hear anybody calling out Adam Smith or saying you have to vote for Kshama Sawant. Just the opposite. They'll say, oh, these are Trumpanzees, people like Kshama. They'll bash Jill Stein. It's all her fault we have Trump in the first place. So Quartz is spot on to a significant degree. A few named targets. Remember how the only target AOC would name in Arizona was Kyrsten Sinema, who's no longer in power, who can't retaliate against AOC in any way, can't vote against her when AOC wants a position. The two senators are fantastic. The two neo-con, neo-lib senators, Gallego and Mark Kelly, are great. Fantastic. Few direct demands. Absolutely. There's not going to be any demands. So Quartz is pretty much spot on in her criticism. But the piece ultimately fails. This piece ultimately is not resistance either. This piece ultimately goes only so far and not far enough, because she, the lever, Evelyn Quartz, doesn't make any demands either. She doesn't make any threats either. She says, well, we need to threaten the elites. We need to threaten to fire them, to take away their power and influence. Well, I agree with her. We do. But she doesn't say how we should do that. She says if the liberal class, meaning the madhouse of this world, cling to symbols of democracy rather than true economic justice, well, if that's what the liberal class is doing, the left, meaning I guess herself, meaning you, me, we must fight for the substance of democracy, which is everyone has health care, right? And we choose our leaders. It's not the Democratic Party that anoints a Kamala Harris. It's not the Democratic Party that unites against a Bernie Sanders. It's that the people actually decide who their nominees are for office and who they actually elect. That's the substance of democracy. And she's saying that's what we need to fight for. Well, I agree with you. That means organizing where power lives, demanding what solidarity requires, and building something that doesn't keep us trapped in an endless cycle of least bad candidates, which is exactly where we are. That's what's the argument for Kamala, right? She's not as bad as the alternative. But where's Evelyn Quartz's demands? Where's her threats? Where is her call for better candidates and saying to the Democratic Party, you don't give us good candidates, well, guess what? We're going to go independent. We're going to vote for Shama Sawant. We're going to vote for Butch Ware in California. There's plenty of them out there right now. We know there are alternatives. Why isn't she naming them? We're going to vote for Andy Ellis in Maryland because, as she points out, real protest, real challenge to power isn't a brand. It's not like, oh, well, we don't like your billionaires, but we like our billionaires. We've got good billionaires, which is what Ken Martin said. No, that's not protest. Protest is a threat. We're going to throw you out. I agree. Where's your threat? Where's your alternative? Where's your solution? There's none. They don't provide it because David Sirota knows where his bread is buttered. It's buttered by, or knows where it's buttered, or who butters it. He knows who butters his bread. It's buttered by affluent, progressive Democrats, not progressives, not working people, not peace activists, but affluent, progressive Democrats. And if he goes just a little bit too far in calling for a real change, for meaningful reform, he loses his bread butterers. And that's the one thing he ain't going to do. All right, real quick, last story. We're over the hour, but I have this in my deck, so I want to just share it with you real quick. So I thought this was an interesting story, and it just came out, breaking news. Supreme Court blocks Mexico's suit against U.S. gun makers. By the way, 8-0 decision. I don't know who was the recusal. Somebody recused, but Elena Kagan, I guess Obama appointee, presented the decision, and they dismissed the case. Mexico had sued in Massachusetts American gun makers, saying, "You're killing our people. And you can see the weapons. Those weapons sure look like they're killing a lot of, can kill a lot of people. The drug wars, the drug cartels, they're armed to the teeth. They're shooting each other down. They're shooting innocent bystanders down. They're shaking people down because of these weapons that you're smuggling into this country. And we want you to compensate us for the loss of life and the economic damages." So the gun makers united and they challenged it, and the Supreme Court said, you can't go forward with this lawsuit. Sorry. You can't prove a link. Now, it seems to me that's a factual question. Can you prove a link or not? Maybe you have some witnesses. Maybe have some people who have Mexican passports who come to testify as witnesses and say, yeah, I bought these weapons at gun stores, and then I was able to ship them across the border. And the gun sellers knew full well what it was for. I even joked about it with one of them. I said, yeah, well, these are for the cartels. They're good customers, ain't they? And we all had a good laugh. That's a factual question. You don't just say, oh, they can't prove their case. How do you know they can't prove their case? As far as I know, there wasn't testimony taken. Maybe there was. I don't think so. It says the suit was blocked. It wasn't dismissed for lack of evidence. So I thought, well, you're not going to get a sympathetic hearing in the United States if you bring that lawsuit. I mean, you might from a jury, but you're not going to get it from the federal courts. So why not sue in Mexico, right? Why not bring the suit in Ciudad, Mexico, or Ciudad Juarez, where there's been so much violence, or Tijuana, where there's so much violence? Why don't you sue there? That would have been my first thought if I was the attorney for the Mexican states. I would sue in Mexico. But I think the problem they ran into when trying to sue in Mexico is these gun makers don't really have any operations in the country. There's like one gun store in Mexico, and I think it basically is only for government officials, for MBI, Mexico Bureau of Investigation, and also for police forces, right? Like if you're a Mexican police, you have guns, they have guns. I saw some, Mexican police, and they had guns when I was in Merida. So I think their gun retailer or their gun seller, who's licensed by the state of Mexico, country of Mexico, nation of Mexico, is government run, government operated, and there's only one. So as far as I know, these gun makers, who make AR-15s, whatever they are, Colt, Smith, and I don't know who makes these guns, they don't actually have assets or operations in Mexico. So even if the court, they had a lawsuit and they were able to prevail in Mexico, they couldn't seize the assets because there wouldn't be any there to seize. And the U.S. government probably would not recognize the judgment by the court, the Mexican court, because there had been no trial with the defendants, meaning the gun makers, present, having been properly served. So I think the U.S. courts would say the Mexican courts didn't have jurisdiction. So I think that's the explanation for why the lawsuit was brought in the United States. And I think it was very wrongly dismissed by the Supreme Court. But, it's the Supreme Court that, like every other branch of our government, is incredibly deferential to the oligarchs. Just does whatever the billionaire class wants with, every now and then, if there's a lot of pressure, maybe they'll shade a decision a little bit against them, but very rarely. By the way, Colt apparently makes the AR-15s. I was looking that up. I don't know who makes the other ones, the AK-47. Now that's Kalashnikov. That's like a Russian gun, so I don't know if that's who. I guess I don't know if they were part of the lawsuit or not. All right, that'll do it for me. I'm recording tonight with Carlos, friend of Halitics. Carlos, I'll play. We'll post that tomorrow, either in lieu of a free-for-all or in addition to a free-for-all. And then tomorrow evening, I've got yet another great guest I'll be recording. So a lot of Halitics coming up. Don't forget, click like, click subscribe more than anything else. I really, really, really want you to subscribe to Halitics.